this whole process of putting the responsibility of crafting the education into the hands of students is a little bit scary, I think, for the student, for the parent, for the institution too. But I think at the end, you get a student who is more engaged and is more likely to stick around, a student who is more likely to launch well at the end. And of course, that leads to all sorts of benefits for the institution. But this really is sort of a narrative change that we have to do in higher education across the board.
It has to happen from the bottom up, from the students. And you need to have schools start saying, let's put resources around this different way of thinking. And my hope would be that in 5 to 10 years, there would be a critical mass of schools that would be practicing this, and then that would have a ripple effect with others.
When these students leave, these are durable skills. They have learned how to look at a wicked problem, analyze it, tear it apart, look at a solution, and design it. They can pick that up and use that anywhere.
Somewhere between the lecture halls and the registrar's office, the real purpose of college has gone missing. We built an educational system around declarations, declaring majors, declaring outcomes, declaring success. But we've forgotten to ask the most important question. What does it mean to learn with intention? Ned Laff spent 35 years working in academic affairs at public and private institutions focusing on curriculum development and student success. Scott Carlson is a senior writer at the Chronicle of Higher Education, where he spent decades investigating how universities operate, evolve, and sometimes break down. Together, they've written Hacking College, a bold invitation to reimagine how students shape their education through something more adaptable than a traditional major, the field of study. And of course, joining us is Howard Teibel, founder of Teibel Education and longtime advisor to college and university leaders. Howard brings the institutional lens. What does it take to shift not just mindsets, but systems themselves? It's a close look at the structures shaping higher education today and what it will take to make them work better for the students inside them. Ned, Scott, Howard, hello to you all, and welcome to this roundtable. I shared with you both this morning that I finished the book, and it made me angry. By way of getting this conversation started, Ned and Scott, it strikes me that at some point, you both had to get angry enough to write this book in the first place. What was it? What inspired this conversation between you to actually put pen to page, page to binding?
Well, I would say that when I met Ned, he was probably the angriest man in higher education.
I agree.
And he would write me and just say, "This is not how higher education should work. The kids should be, getting through. People should be paying attention to the students and so on." Unfortunately, I ignored him for a couple of years as I was working on, standard Chronicle stuff. And then I went to see him in Chicago and finally got hours and hours of the, of the tirade. And it lit me up in a lot of ways. I mean, in a lot of ways, he helped me see things that, even reporters from the Chronicle don't always see so clearly.
My anger, I don't know if it's anger or frustration. It's because I had an incredible experience at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. I had the opportunity to work with a vice president for academic affairs and a vice president for student affairs who liked each other. And they were willing to pilot projects. I got lucky when they started the General Education Center. The director of the center was my advisor, who ended up being my mentor. We would talk for hours because I would be bumping into all these problems at the university, which shouldn't have been problems. And they actually weren't problems if you knew how to work the game. That started me off on this little tirade that's gone on for 35 years. And it really focused the intent of the book. When Scott and I got together, we decided we wanted to write a book directed at students that all the data says everything's against you, you're not going to make it. That's the first thing. At schools, which most people would say that's not going to open the door to anywhere, because the logic was if it works there, it'll work anywhere.
I want to say from the outset, I come in with the fire that I agree and I'm on board. This book also comes with a lot of hope. And I think from the systemic perspective, right, when we look at institutions as systems, I came away thinking, you know what, everybody is well-intentioned, and we tend to get so lost in our day-to-day. What we're talking about is a set of shared outcomes for everybody.
Yeah, and this is such a big conversation because this is a conversation that I am sure when people read this, they will say, this should have been explored 20 years ago in the way it's being explored today. This is also a function of the recognition that it's not the same world than when I grew up, where you could be more intentional and have an idea of what you wanted, and then it was sort of a linear path. And the world doesn't live like that. So the timing of this book is a wake-up call in a culture that for the most part is complacent, and not complacent like not doing important things, but there is so much inertia to keep the structure around how we budget, how we enroll, what retention's focused on. And there's a certain undoing that has to happen to make this possible. But it needs a vision, which I think this book provides.
The book comes from this perspective of reminding the core consumer, the student, that there is possibility to have joy in education again, right? This whole exploration behind, curriculum as a course of study versus a checklist, that inertia, the administrative inertia just pushes students through this mill just because these are the boxes that we said needed to be checked before graduation was achieved. What was the moment, I'll ask for both you, Ned and Scott, what was the moment you realized that this traditional major framework wasn't working for students or institutions? This thing has been evolving for decades now. What were the signs that you were seeing that we needed to reframe how we think about the language we use for achieving academic success?
For me, it was in my doctoral work, because I got the opportunity to work at individual plans of study with my mentor. Now, the interesting thing is at that time, general education and individual plans of study were in the same office under the same individual. So now all of a sudden, you have somebody who's working there with an idea on the ground floor with students who were considered undecided, and with students who were coming in and saying, I can't seem to do what I want to do at a school like the University of Illinois in Urbana, which on that campus, like most major institutions, you can, anything you dream of, you can do on those campuses. And so when I started working there, and I started to realize that for every student we would let into the individual plans of studies program, 25 or 30 would be able to find how to craft and design their undergraduate education under the rubric of a traditional major. It just got everyone in the office thinking, wait a second, this individual plans of study process can drop down on any academic program. Changes the way students see the university, changes the way they see the resources, changes the way they see the opportunities they can create for themselves. It was really kind of exciting.
I think for me, where it came from was, I have a long history at the Chronicle of writing about sustainability and writing about how education connects to social problems and low-income students and these big issues that we're trying to grapple with as a society. I mean, I'm very much a cultural reporter as well as a higher education reporter. And whenever you're going at those kinds of problems or thinking about them, It's always these multidisciplinary kinds of solutions that come through. You're never going to find it in sort of one lane. Ned coming to me and talking about how the college learning process is actually this amalgamation of all of these different kinds of strands that are running through your learning that's going through college. That's at least how it should be. Really resonated with me in terms of how I'm looking at the problems that we're facing. And it also got me to realize just how limited education was in certain ways when we're just sort of marching students through these steps and thinking that, well, on the other side, they're going to come out with something as long as they have a certificate, right? And now you see that kind of language everywhere where people are talking about skills, people are talking about like, what are the durable skills? What are the kinds of technical skills that we're going to give them? Can we give them a certificate in lieu of a college degree or college learning, And that's really sort of going at this problem in that sort of old way that I was talking about. It really has to be this process in which the student is engaged with it, bringing stuff from their own background, and then seeing all the possibilities in the college atmosphere and how they can connect all of these things. That's what's going to allow the student to sort of evolve from there to solve problems out in the real world.
Scott, I got to ask, though, I mean, everything you're describing here demands a student that has agency in this conversation. You write about a lot of schools. You write about the industry and the culture. Do students today feel like they have agency in their education, their undergraduate education?
Students don't feel like they do because they don't grab the wheel on driving their own life in that sense. They're trained to come out of the K-12 system thinking, well, if I just sort of jump through these hoops and pass through these courses and get the grades I need to get, if I pick the right major, this is a big part of the subtitle of our book, that's going to sort of set me up. In truth, students are able to go everywhere on campus. They are able to take advantage of what's offered. They do have, what Ned would call letters of transit coming from Casablanca, right? They're able to go anywhere and talk to anyone. You give students a whole lot of leeway in terms of what you allow them to do in a lot of cases. And so students just need to have the permission. They need to be coached into being able to do that. And that's something that the colleges are not really doing well, I would say.
I'll riff on Casablanca. I'm shocked, I tell you, that there is education going on in this establishment. Because look, what we've set up here is students who don't recognize they have the agency to take in spite of their letters of transit. And we have an administration that is demonstrating a structural misalignment by meeting students not where they need to be, but where the checklist lives.
As I'm listening to Ned and Scott, I'm being reminded, and I'm getting angry too, because I'm realizing that what's missing is people having a voice. When you talked earlier, Scott, is we have to give people permission to be able to recognize that they can put their hand and say, this isn't working for me, or I would like to try something different. We don't prepare adults like that. I mean, we are followers, but not the kind of followers that we bought into it. We don't know that we can step in and have a voice in these conversations. And from a structural standpoint, between advising, student affairs, finance, they are following a certain path that has been brought down from the strategic plans that come from the current administration. And there is a sense that basically our job is to make sure that we can tell a story and how we're tying to the current structure. The whole structure is not designed to think creatively. The skill to develop in finance, in administration, is to be willing to step back and to think more creatively. But the compelling problem right now, and I'm going to pivot this a little bit, Pete, from your question about tying it back to budget and advising. I was thinking recently about the consequences if we don't make these shifts. What made working not be tied to an office? What made Zoom and what we're doing right now in this platform truly a practice that's in the background, that's invisible to us? It was COVID. COVID and the disruption of COVID forced us to really do some difficult things. This is a big lift. It has to happen from the bottom up, from the students. And you need to have schools start saying, let's put resources around this different way of thinking. And my hope would be that in 5 to 10 years, there would be a critical mass of schools that would be practicing this, and then that would have a ripple effect with others. But a core dilemma I see, Pete, and I would say this to you, Scott and Ned, is the lack of clarity about the consequences if we don't make this shift. And I don't think that's clear yet.
I would say that the consequences though are on the horizon. If you think about what the average family now is thinking about the value of college education, or what is the purpose of college education? I mean, the key purpose that they're going in with is this has to get my kid a job at the end of the journey, right? Like that is the number one purpose now, and has been for a number of years. Wasn't always, but I think it was in the background. So that's key thing number one. The second is this broad and I think mistaken national conversation about what the value of college is. This conversation that really sort of oversimplifies what it's really all about and really gets some of the facts wrong around like what does it actually cost and what will it wind you up with? And again, like how does the study in certain majors either fit into that or not fit into that, right? That's another big thing. And I think the third big thing is all of that is sort of driving the political atmosphere, which is Trump and what he and his administration is doing to colleges, which is, I think could be quite devastating for a number of smaller institutions and really, um, you know, profile altering for even larger ones.
Let's turn our attention a little bit to put some more specific language about around what we're asking for in the book, right? Ned, do you want to just introduce us in short strokes to the field of study framework, to what you're talking about here?
So the idea behind a field of study is this. When somebody says they want to be something like, I want to go into psychology, or I want to go into business, or I want to major in sociology. None of those things say anything. I don't know what it means. You could do anything with any of those fields. You could go from, I want to be a mental health counselor to, I want to go into the psychology of economics and crush trading on the commodities exchange. So all of these things are possible if students can see the resources that are available to them. And this means the granular level of looking at the course catalog before you even decide anything about a major. When a student says, I think I have an interest in psychology, take Intro to Psych, which will give you no understanding of any of the fields in psychology. When you go up and sit in a senior seminar or graduate seminars, and you can, right? All of a sudden you find out each faculty member is a complete different field of study of specialists underneath this big umbrella. So now you have courses. You have a degree audit with blank spaces. You've identified that your faculty are incredible in so many ways that you have never been introduced to. Now you can start looking to see where all the resources on the campus are. And this includes the corporate side of campus, the physical side of campus, as well as the classes themselves. But the kicker is sending students out to talk to people who are doing what they want to do. And the conversations they have are absolutely incredible. They're not going to get courses. They're going to get experiences that they should have. And that can be brought back to campus and translated into quote unquote college speak. Instead of just picking courses, students begin to design courses around that thing they care about.
You're inspiring me, Ned. And you're inspiring me because with the amount of degree granting institutions out there, whether it's 4,000 or 5,000, the nonprofit or the for-profit, it would seem to me a way to leverage moving this whole thing forward is that there are schools out there and universities who are starting to practice this, who have either seen what you're talking about in your book, although it's relatively new, but there are places out there that have been practicing, trying to bring this experiential, non-major focus, but a way to engage a student to think about what it means to be in the world.
Yes.
I wonder to what extent part of what's going to drive some of this is people starting to pay attention to this is the school that's going to allow you to do this. And more students and families say, this is the kind of experience I want for my students. So I'm curious from the two of you, if you have a recognition or even some schools that you see that are really doing this well right now.
I do. There's a number of places out there that have kind of almost design your own major types of programs. So you would look at a place like College of the Atlantic, for example, where every major is called human ecology. They only have one major there. And that can mean whatever you want it to mean, and from that, the students have to sort of decide, have to sort of craft their own way through their college education. You have places like NYU Gallatin, which has more of an individualized sort of plan of study there, and a number of institutions like that. Now, whether that would be attractive to families and students is a major question. I think it depends on how the school conveys that to their audience. I think a lot of parents and students are actually looking for certainty. And I think they're looking for certainty in these names of majors that sound like jobs, business, finance, data analytics, computer science, and so on. This whole process of putting the responsibility of crafting the education into the hands of students is a little bit scary, I think, for the student, for the parent, for the institution too. But I think at the end, you get a student who is more engaged and is more likely to stick around, a student who is more likely to launch well at the end. And of course, that leads to all sorts of benefits for the institution. But this really is sort of a narrative change that we have to do in higher education across the board.
So I want to ask something else because I'm focused on how do you create momentum here? Is it incremental or transformational? Meaning, one way to look at this is we got to start with a blank sheet of paper and redesign the whole system. Another way is we got to find ways to augment this structure that is likely not going away, but that it becomes more prominent, that students can take advantage of it. Some people are going to want the certainty, and they're data analytics or business, or I want to be an engineer, and they know where they're going to go. The structure helps them. But there's a vast number of students, to your point, that don't know what they want to do. They have an idea of a direction. So when you think about momentum here, 2 years from now, what would you want to see that you're not seeing right now? Is it a wholesale attempt to change, or is it a way to bring some of this thinking into the schools? I'm looking at this going, this is something that there needs to be more conversation about. And I could see the importance of bringing this in and augmenting it. I don't see it as a transformation like we're going to rid the schools of their current structures. I think we have to find a way to bring in some of this thinking, but I'm curious what the two of you see.
Howard, you're absolutely right. We are not advocating changing the structure, but there's something else important. In all my years, I've never met an undecided student. I've only met students who were undeclared, right? This is one of the reasons why 80% of students change their majors, because what they're thinking about, they may not be able to see when they're looking at the structure of the school, but the structure of the school does allow them to do it if they can see it. What I'm trying to advocate, or what I have been advocating, because I was asked this question, I don't want something coming top down. I would like a group of administrators to say to some people, pilot this. Take these students at random and take another group of students at random, put one through this hacking college model, let the others go through it, right? And then track them to see what happens. Then, at that point, even the programs that you think are lockstep, like engineering, they begin to change because engineering faculty are field of study specialists. Sometimes those fields of study don't get into the undergraduate curriculum. They get into maybe independent studies, but mostly it's up in the grad school, right? This doesn't mean you have to increase resources. You may already have them on your campus. You just may not be able to see them and see how those resources can be used in a slightly different way. And all of a sudden, the whole nature of your college campus changes from the student experiential side without the structure of the campus changing at all.
We did call the book Hacking College because we didn't think that the institutions would adopt this. We thought that a group of true believers within the institutions would resonate with what we've written about in the book, and then from the bottom up would change their institution by helping the students hack it, right? They create this what's called in urban planning a desire path, right? The desire path is that dirt path that cuts across the grass in the quad that everybody uses to get from the biology building to the library, and it's not paved, and facilities sometimes like blocks it off and replants the grass, and then eventually they put a sidewalk there because they figure that's the place where everyone wants to go. They institutionalize it in some sense. And that's sort of what we envisioned would happen with Hacking College. We've been surprised in the sense that like a number of people have read it and are now, they've created this Hacking College learning community at the University of Minnesota that was joined by 200 people. You've got a number of people across the country that have read it at various institutions like Champlain College or NYU, and they really love it and want to start to incorporate this kind of thinking into what they're doing. So there is a top-down future for this possibly, but we really do look at this as kind of a skunkworks program. Get the people, the coalition of the willing together and help the students work the system from there. And what you'll get the institution to see is that this might be a better way to work with certain kinds of students.
Yes, and Howard, you're right. On every campus, there's people thinking this way, but in many instances, they didn't have a vocabulary or framework to work with. When you're hacking college, for example, nobody knows it's happening. So when I was doing these things, the students were all graduating under the rubric of a major, but not when you talk to them. They would talk about what their field of study was about and how they put the pieces together and how they created these incredible experiential opportunities for themselves. So it can work without a major upheaval in the institutional structure. This is how it changes recruitment because students talk to students about what they're doing. It affects retention. It affects student engagement. It affects all the things that we want students to get involved in. It also changes their experience in the classroom. I always ask people, did you ever go to a movie with your friends? And of course, everyone says yes. And then I ask, did you see the same movie? Partially yes, partially not, because they're interpreting things. Well, when students are using field of study, they're using those interpretive strategies to pull meaning from the courses that they've picked. They're the ones tying together the general education courses that they're choosing with electives, minors, courses that they're opting for in the major. When these students leave, these are durable skills. They have learned how to look at a wicked problem, analyze it, tear it apart, look at a solution, and design it. They can pick that up and use that anywhere.
I'd love to put some words to the resistance that you find, because everything you've described, and I'll rewind a bit to Scott, who said parents and students are looking for certainty. I believe, Scott, your words, certainty. How else do we see, or do you see resistance to this, to the ideas of reframing in terms of a field of study rise up in terms of faculty, in terms of advising, in terms of the other structures that are designed to support the rails?
I'll go into a couple and then Ned can go into a couple from his experience. But from what we've encountered, a couple of the common responses are one is, well, students don't really know what they want to do. So it's impossible for students to do this because they have no idea. The 18-year-old doesn't really know what they want to do. I take that and accept that to some extent, students are living more vicariously through their phones. So they haven't had the opportunity to really go out and experience things in person or really understand what roles are out there. A number of other students just never have the opportunity because they don't have the money to go to high-placed summer programs or, sort of other experiences that money buys. But at the same time, we really do believe, that a lot of students come into the college experience with an inkling of what this thing is that's drawing them to this, that would power their way through college. So that's one of the concerns we hear. Another one of the concerns we hear is that students are not going to be able to go out and talk to people. This is a key piece of the field of study process, the research and investigative inquiry, where students go out and they find people that are working in the areas of the hidden job market that they want to someday enter. And so the common complaint is, well, we can barely get students to talk to us. They're not going to go out and talk to strangers. Our response to that is that this is a skill that students will eventually have to learn in order to enter the world. And so it's good to get students trained up on this at some level. Maybe this is a part of the college experience. Certainly there's people out there like Julia Freeland Fisher who are talking about how students need to be trained up in these skills in high school. We don't think it's out of the bounds of responsibility to ask a student in college to try to approach people outside and talk to them.
Universities have created a dysfunctional mess.
Tell us what you really think, Ned.
These aren't difficult problems to think out. It's just sort of like, you know what? Let's go back and remember that we are a community. And let's figure out how the different parts of the community integrate and live together. And keep in mind, yes, we can have high quality research, but at the same time, we could have high quality undergraduate experiences for the students. So when I look at when somebody says, so-and-so is an innovative president, the first thing I do is I want to know what's going on at the undergraduate level. Anyone can be innovative if you're talking about just your research initiatives and maybe affecting 10 or 12 students or 30 students in a class. But when you have a university that can say, we are bringing these students in who aren't coming in with loads of AP courses, and they're graduating, and we've pushed our graduation rates up to like in the high 70s, low 80s, and they are coming out being able to create social networks for themselves, to create experiential learnings for themselves. And we've done this by changing the conversations we have with them. Those are the boundaries. Let's get back to caring about it. Somebody asked me, what's the first thing I do when I'm working on workshops? Every student who walks into your office is your kid. How do you want your kid treated?
We talked a little bit earlier about the coalition of the willing, right? And one of my early questions was giving agency back to the kids. But everything you're talking about is the call to action is everyone in the chain needs to take the agency that they have and have earned in the institution. And so I have to ask, does that seem reasonable?
Yes. And can a president do this? Back in the 20th century, a former president of DePaul University gave every member on campus Bloom's Scholarship Reconsidered. And then what he said, if you're going to be writing on student success, if you're going to be looking at this stuff, you're going to get credit for this for tenure. What a massive change, right? Can we do this? Yes, because essentially, I think about this all the time. I know that my alma mater competes like hell in Big Ten sports against all the other schools out there. And I know they compete for federal research dollars at the upper level. But internally to that campus, they are that campus. And they have people there who are committed to making their campus great. Let them run. Help them out. Say this is part of our process. And the things that will take place will be amazing. But this is a headset change, a cultural shift.
Howard, let's go back up top to where you tend to live. What does it look like for the senior leadership, financial leaders listening to this? How do you imagine they're hearing this message right now? Are they hearing it as a call to courage, as a call to clarity and bravery?
So as I've been listening, and to your question about financial leaders, and let's go beyond financial leaders, because these are the stewards of the institution along with their boards. your financial administrative leaders are looking to their most senior leaders, their presidents and chancellors, to say, it is a priority to make these changes. And in the absence of that, it's going to be business as usual. They will have some ways to be creative, but typically the creativity lives in how do we do the work more efficiently. It's not going to be about changing the underlying structure unless they have a leader that is willing to move that. Now, as I was listening to both of you and I was thinking back, I had this really unique opportunity working with Plymouth State University, where they brought in a new president from Penn State, Don Burks, and he was charged to build what he called a cluster model, not just, within a particular department, but to remove the college structure over a period of 3 years, the dean, the chair, the whole model of a departmental structure, and transform the university into a cluster model where the focus is about a discipline or an outcome. So rather than having the environmental studies department, there are disciplines or clusters like justice and security, innovation and entrepreneurship, health and human excellence. I was part of the team, so they brought us in to help with getting their faculty and chairs to embrace this new idea. The board gave a whole bunch of money to move this forward. And I can tell you that in the absence of this president saying this is something that our board is saying that we're going to do, we're going to move this forward, the resistance was there. But they are ahead of the curve in terms of recognizing that in our region of the country, in Plymouth, New Hampshire, we need to think differently to attract students here because for most schools, they're drawing from their region. And the challenge with that area was it's not like it's between New York City and Boston. At a very high level, they are waiting for their senior leadership to say, this is a priority for us. And to your point, Ned, the way to move this forward is to pilot it. Where do we want to try this? Maybe within even a particular college. It's not going to change the overall, the overarching structure of higher ed unless something fundamentally external to us forces us to, we cannot operate like this anymore. If the vast number of colleges cannot afford to stay in business. But in the absence of some very significant external crisis, we need to find a way for those who are committed to seeing a change here. And I think they're out there. So I'm inspired by the two of you.
I have more modest goals. Well, let me give you an example. Why is pre-med in the biology department?
Is that rhetorical?
I don't know. I mean, there's no reason it should be in the biology department. I will send students out to sit in a waiting room in a hospital. I will ask them, I want you to detail everything you hear. Every time I do this, they come back and say, I must have heard 30 different languages. What does that tell you? 30 different cultural problems in the delivery of healthcare. Now I need you to go into these hospitals and start talking to doctors about what they actually do when they doctor. All of a sudden, what they're beginning to see is I need to be looking at something like I need to be fluent, maybe in French and maybe French and Spanish. I need to pick up possibly some cultural anthropology, or I can actually major in anthropology, pick up the French, and hear the pre-med sciences. And in the meantime, with this background, I can begin to create experiential opportunities in the different clinics that are focused on different ethnic populations. Okay, now this is so much common sense that it's a joke, right? But so what would happen is now all of a sudden these non-vocational humanities realize that without sacrificing their non-vocational status, they're vocational as hell. And they're bringing students in, right? Now, yes, the biology department will be losing some undergraduate students. We have to create a system where it's the integrated picture that's rewarded. so that biology can say it's okay, so that the advisors can say that it's okay, that somebody can sit down and say, you can go into advertising through sociology. You could go into organizational leadership through psychology.
So Ned, you've provoked me into something. Then I'm going to put our impeccable facilitator on the spot, and you know who you are, Pete. Because as I'm listening to us talk about getting these 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds to have agency, part of what they're influenced by, if we're talking about the undergraduate experience, at least if we focus on that, are the roles that our surrogates and parents play. And I'm thinking about you, Pete, and you're listening to this with also kids going through, your children go through this experience. How is this affecting your thinking about bringing this to your own children to think about how they're navigating this? Is this affecting you to think about, all right, what do I need to do differently?
Well, it's funny you should ask this. I mean, this morning I had a conversation, not about my son, but my son's dear friend who is studying with my son, same school, who's getting a Bachelor of Science, and his program is in neuroscience. But he's a freshman, and he has decided that he's going to transfer his junior year because his diploma will only say Bachelor of Science, not Bachelor of Science in Neuroscience. And he'll get that diploma at a different university outside of our fair state. And he's doing that specifically for the words on the diploma. And he's going to take that program the last 2 years in neuroscience through their online college. And I'm flummoxed by that decision because it manifests exactly out of the checklist kind of thinking that we have trained the kids to have, and sacrificing the deep relationships that are built in these last 2 years with his faculty members, with the professors who are teaching him, sacrificing the incredible personal referrals that he'll get out of those relationships for an online program for the letters on the diploma. It breaks my heart. It breaks my heart.
Nobody.
So I got to be honest with you, Howard. I feel pretty good. My kids don't know what it's like to have a real job because my job has been chaos for the last 20 years. So they have a natural sort of improvisational approach to work, and I applaud them for that. But for the systems, and as a someone who survived to tell the tale about being a long-term faculty member at a university that went bankrupt and suffocated itself to death, I feel bereft on that side because of this conversation. Absolutely bereft.
Well, Scott, I'm watching Scott's expression, listening to the story about the diploma and the paper and moving off. What's your reaction to hearing this? It's probably in some ways not a surprise, but it's a really good anecdote of the implications of how these structures force people to go towards something that's really not going to expand who they are. It might give them what the appearance of something that they still believe that they need. I need it to say neuroscience on the piece of paper. Otherwise, I won't be able to find ways into places that are looking for people that do neuroscience.
What strikes me is that I think if there isn't meaning attached to the educational piece of it, if the student is not investing themselves in, this is why I'm here. I'm here to learn about the actual knowledge and the actual skills that are being delivered through the college education, then I think the rest of the experience is going to suffer because the students are going to say, well, the knowledge part doesn't really matter. I could write the papers through Chat GPT and no one's going to know. I can sort of fake my way through, this other elective over here. I can take these courses through online and sort of be there, but also sort of sleep in every day and not be part of the sort of the campus environment, which again, I think that is also part of this learning experience that's very valuable that students should take advantage of. So if we're not infusing the education part with meaning and with purpose, I think the students will just opt for the easiest option. And then that, I think, starts to have its own deleterious process on what is college, what are these students actually going through in this process to learn, and how does that sort of make this whole college learning process evolve into something that is really not something I would recognize, or maybe something Ned, you, or Howard would not recognize.
So my daughters they cheated their way through college, right? Even when they were doing their undergraduate application, they went through that part, but they were contacting people on campus that they wanted to talk to. And the faculty were so stunned that somebody who was just applying to college wanted to talk to them about studying with them. That's what we should be teaching students, that there is this developmental issue, that yes, you want to prepare for this job, but there's more than that. There's growth, there's development, there's intellectual curiosity, there's being challenged by ideas. I think a failure is going to be turned into something that's valuable because you learn from it and you learn to keep moving forward. All of these things are part of the process. And what we're doing is we're just sort of tracking them. And they end up with, I have an empty degree in neuroscience.
You know, in spite of that real downer ending on your inspirational monologue there, Ned, I have to tell you, one of the things that I pick up from the book, just as we wrap up here, is that there is room to have exuberance in learning again. I already said it, in joy, but you know what else? There is room to have exuberance in teaching again, right? That when you get all the administrative stuff out of the picture and put a student and an educator in the room together, and no one else is in the way with checklists, magic happens. And that is a message I certainly hope people get out of the book, out of our conversation today. Magic is possible in these young people. Thank you. Thanks for the book. Thank you for being here.
I got three things that I got out of this. One, at the heart of this is promoting agency, the capacity for people to see they have a voice in their education experience, and preparing them at a young age, at a younger age, even before they enter the college experience, that this actually belongs in the high school conversations to start moving them forward. Secondly, and I think you said this, Scott, to leverage those institutions that are already prepared to move on this. And then, as you said, Ned, to find ways to pilot this, because that's where people will start seeing the value. And then the FOMO starts to show up, where people start going, well, look what they're doing over there. So I think I am more encouraged from this conversation that this is already happening. And the question now is, how do we build this out in the world? So I've been shifted from this conversation. I've loved the idea, but I actually think it's more practical than I realized until we had a conversation with you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Howard.
Thank you, Howard.
And thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to this show. We appreciate your time and your attention. Of course, links to the book are going into the show notes, links to the community, links to any of the links that Scott and Ned want me to put in the show notes. I'm going to put them in the show notes. So you make sure you swipe up in your podcast app or visit the website, and we will have all of those resources there for you. On behalf of our fantastic guests and this incredible book, Ned Laff and Scott Carlson and Howard Teibel, thank you all so much for being here, being a part of this conversation. I'm Pete Wright, and we'll see you next time right here on Navigating Change.